it's a new day here at Crown Auto with the same old objective, trying to get this old Chevy pickup back on the road again. And in today's episode, I'm going to be installing a complete power steering unit using the original steering column. I bought a complete kit for it. And so we're gonna try to get that put on here today, and hopefully everything goes smoothly. I've been putting this project off for a little while now just because it's so involved, and there's a little bit of light fabrication, which is no big deal. It's just anytime you get in these situations where you're trying to make parts from a vehicle that was never designed for fit, there's always trouble and always difficulty. So we're gonna jump into that here in a second, and I'm gonna show you a couple of small upgrades and fixes I've done since the last time you've seen this thing. So we'll get into that real quick, and then we'll get started on this power steering unit. Just kind of picking up here where I left off from the last episode. And some of the stuff I did off camera was I got the parking brake to finally work. I just had to adjust it. It was way out of adjustment, but that works, and it works well. Got the brakes bled, they work, and they work well. The clutch was out of adjustment also, which it just wouldn't, you push it to the floor and the clutch wouldn't release, so you couldn't get it in gear without grinding. And so I got that all fixed, and everything works nicely. The truck runs and moves under its own power. Just kind of have lot driven it back and forth in first gear there. Also ended up, I get a good shot of that, getting my shift handle installed. I ended up going with this kind of 4-speed style aftermarket shifter, just because the original one that I was using, no matter which orientation I adjusted it in, it would either hit the dash or hit the seat. It was just way too long. I ended up getting this to work. A better shot of it. I had to hack the hole bigger. It was kind of already cut square, and I had to hack it kind of round. And then I had to I just used a piece of thicker steel there. I had to extend it up because it was way too short to reach. Then I also had to bend it fairly extensively, just because, again, it would either go way under the dash or end up way into the seat. But now it works nicely, and I'm really happy with it. Another small upgrade, but something I was really wanting to do, I don't know if you really call it an upgrade, is I ended up installing a neutral safety switch. I don't believe these vehicles ever came with one. I really have no idea, to tell you the truth. But I was really concerned about that, just because if you turn the key with it in first gear, it would take off and perhaps start and drive away. And I really didn't like that. I kind of wanted to make stuff more usable, have a parking brake, have a neutral safety switch. And anyway, what I did for that, get in there a little bit closer, is I just used a factory stock brake light switch for the 47 to 55 Chevy, and you can see I just put it in the clutch, and then I wired the starter trigger wire, which comes from the fuse box of the key to the starter, and then just ran it to the switch. So when you, just like the brake, when you push the clutch in, it completes the circuit and you have power to your starter, and your starter will engage. So that went really smoothly, and that worked out really nicely, and I'm really, really happy with how that worked out. So now I'm gonna go through the power steering kit that I purchased, and I'm gonna go into it kind of in some detail, just for people watching at home, anybody looking to do this same swap. I'll kind of just give you my experiences and what I've learned, and some of what I've learned so far, and probably what I will end up learning. So anyway, I bought this kit from Tucker's Classic Truck Parts, just a website I found online. It's advertised to be the most complete kit for the 47 to 55 advanced design trucks. And so far, I'm not at all impressed with it. It's not really all that complete. And honestly, if you wanted to piece all this stuff together, you could probably save a good $300 to $400 easily, I'm assuming. Everything with this kit, as far as the box, the pump, the pulleys, the bracket, not the bracket, I don't really know. That is all 67 to 72, just factory power steering parts for a 67 to 72 C10. And the parts that they gave me in this kit are all just cheapo auto parts store, reman, gear and pump. So we'll see how that plays out. The main part of what it is missing is they give you these U-joints, which yeah, they look real nice and all, but the only one that will really work is I think this one here will work, which you weld that onto the column side, the shaft, the steering shaft that runs through the column. We'll get to more of that later. And then that goes to your double D shaft. But this, what I'm assuming, is supposed to go onto the gear, and then the shaft comes out of this side right here where my pinky is. But that, I have no idea what that it goes to, but it doesn't go to this steering gear because it's way too small. So after doing some research, I ended up at the junkyard again. And what I'm going to do is I got this shaft from like a 71, 72 C10 truck, and it is a collapsible, which this goes into here, which I've already separated it, and you can see right there. It's held in by some little plastic, I don't know what you call them, kind of just little plastic shafts, and I just melted them out with a torch and beat it apart. What I'm going to do is since this is the right spline, this will go on the steering gear side. It's kind of hard because some of this is going to be upside down, like so. And then this will slide in to this. And then it would be this end here to my column. So that was kind of a rigmarole because none of this stuff from the way they sent it to me would work with the steering gear they supplied. So you got to figure it out on your own for that. Another thing is, we'll get some light in here. This brace does not come with the kit as well. I had to purchase that separately and install it. They provide absolutely nothing. So you just have the column that would be the only thing holding the column. And their tech line is not helpful. Colin talked to the tech line, he had no idea what I was even talking about. So they were of no use. Second thing is the pulleys. I think they assumed that the truck already has like an AC power steering. I don't know why on earth they would. But this nice shiny pulley doesn't look right for what I'm using it for, and it's a double belt pulley, which I don't know what the thinking is behind that. So I ended up buying this pulley. Again, it's just for a 67 to 72 power steering pump. It's the keyed type that bolts on. I bought a new bracket, and by the way, this bracket and pulley, they come together as a kit that I bought on Speedway. Now this kit does come with a bracket, and it's this type of just generic bracket. But the only problem with it is that the belt interferes with like this bolt right here big time. And I think it's kind of overly complicated for what it is. I think this will look way cleaner. You won't even really see it. So that's my reasoning behind that. Also, I had to supply a crank pulley because mine's a single, because it has no accessories. So you got to get a double groove crank pulley. So that's about it that I can think of off the top of my head. So I think I got everything rounded up, but like I said, I got this from Tucker's Classic Truck Parts. It costs an arm and a leg. It costs almost $1,400, and I'm not impressed at all. It's a lot of cheap parts just thrown together and figure it out yourself. So I wouldn't recommend it. I would honestly recommend just piecing everything together. Again, 67 to 72 parts, and then just the steering linkage parts, some of the mount parts, that's all just classic performance stuff. You can just buy their kit for this style truck and then just piece out just the 67 to 72 parts. Just save a bundle of money. I highly recommend doing that. If I had to do it all over again, I would do that. So all that being said, we're gonna work with what we got here, and we're gonna jump in here and see if we can't get this thing to have some power steering. Okay, so I'm starting to get kind of into the thick of it here, and what I got going on is they want you to basically move this bracketry. This is the lower bracket, upper bracket to go behind the axle instead of in front of the axle. So it'd kind of be like so. And I might actually change to a different shock. One of the issues I'm having is the front ends are really stiff. The nose sits up pretty good. I'm not really concerned with that. I'm more concerned with how stiff it rides. So what I've done here, so I took that center pin out and I removed a leaf. I removed this small lower leaf. I've never done this before, so I'm hoping that will make somewhat of a difference. Just kind of make it a little more compliant. It's pretty, I can get on the front of this and jump and it doesn't really move much. And here I've done the same on this side. I put C-clamps on there. I don't know if you really need them or not. I just watched some other YouTube videos because I've never done this before. And everybody says to clamp them, so I did. I don't think I would have went anywhere anyways, but I figure better safe than sorry. So I did that. And you're also gonna have to, if you're removing leaves, you have to trim down that pin because this sits on top of there and it'll be too long and then it won't. You can see how it kind of mashed into that rubber there, but it probably will only go so far. So that's where I've gotten so far, and kind of a little more on these shock mounts. I don't know what kind of setup they have from the factory, but they do sell aftermarket front upper shock mounts, which is what this is. This one actually looks homemade. Actually, I'm really pretty sure it's homemade. I'm 90% sure this is homemade. And it was just bolted on there. So I'm gonna have to do some digging. I'll probably end up using this. It's kind of cumbersome, but it's kind of cool. I'll probably one of one, I'm assuming. So we're gonna figure out that in my shock setup. I might change some things with that. So the next step I think I'm gonna button this up and get my lower shock mount on. And then I think I'm gonna cut this column right here, remove the gear and the linkage. And then I might you have to kind of cut the shaft and then cut the tube back. There's a shaft that runs through there and cut the tube back. And then you use this bearing kit to go in there. So I think I might tackle that next because that's really the part of the project that I'm not really sure on and not really confident on myself completing cleanly. So I think I'll tackle that next. Just another quick note on this install. The instructions call for you to swap these. This is the lower mount. The instructions call for you to swap these from side to side, but it doesn't work. This one is actually, just one-handed here. Actually on the passenger side, the right side. This mount goes like this, and the shock goes to there. And in the instructions, they want you to swap side to side, which doesn't work, I found out. What you do is you just swap front to back, and you flip it over. Get that in there, like so, and your shock runs back up somewhere in there. So just a quick note, the instructions are wrong. If you try to use the mount, if you try to swap side to side, no matter what orientation, get in there. See, it faces the opposite wrong way there. And then there again, this is the mount that came off the driver's side. So you don't want to swap side to side, just front to back and flip. Next up, I'm gonna cut this column here, just using an angle grinder and a cutoff wheel. Should be interesting because I won't be able to get all the way through it. I'll probably cut right in there. So yeah, we'll see where it goes. This is the point of no return right here. Either this column's gonna work after I cut it, or we're gonna have to go aftermarket or something, which I definitely don't wanna do just for expense and appearance. So without further ado, let's start cutting. So here's our cut. We got a cut all the way through there. And I almost made it all the way through with just the angle grinder and a new blade. Had to get the die grinder out. Just do a little on the backside and it let go. As you can see, the cut is not very straight, but that's okay, because what we're gonna do, what they call for, is you to back cut this housing. There's a shaft inside of here, the steering shaft. I want you to back cut, put your bearing in, and then leave a stub of the shaft hanging out. So we're gonna remove the steering box, get that out of the way, and then I will back cut that, and then start messing around trying to fit my bearing and getting all the lengths right. They want you to pull the wheel and drop out the shaft inside of there, which I probably will do at some point. I probably won't follow the directions to the T, but we'll see how it goes. We'll get the steering gear out of here, get this blanket out of here, give me some room, and then we'll start kind of sizing up that bushing that goes in there. Okay, here's where we're at with this. I have made my second cut to expose more of the steering shaft inside there. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this adapter. It's from Classic Performance. It's called a steering column saver, because I wanna use this original column. What you do is you slide this over that and slide it flush in there. You wanna cut this, by the way, as straight as you can. I got it fairly straight. It's far from perfect though, as you can see, but I'm gonna get a little better. The instructions call for you to actually remove the steering wheel and the shaft and then make your cut. I didn't do it that way just because I used a cutoff wheel. I'll show you what I used here. This is what I used to cut it, and I'm just extremely comfortable using one of these. So I didn't bother taking it apart, and I didn't even nick the shaft, so I wouldn't say that's a recommendation or a requirement, as long as you're fairly handy and confident. This fits in there extremely tight, and so what they want you to do is fit this in here to where you want it, mark it, then pull the wheel off, pull everything apart. You have to assemble it because there's collars, you see, on either side that hold it, the back and forth, up and down. And you want to mark it so that you have 1/8 of an inch, or just proper clearance between the housing and your wheel, so your steering wheel's not grinded on the column housing. So we're gonna slide this in there. We also drill a little hole for a set screw. Slide this in there to where we want it, and mark it, then disassemble it, pull the wheel out, pull the shaft out, and assemble everything, throw it back in, and that should be that for the column. Okay, so I got the column shaft removed, and in order to do that, I had to pull this steering wheel, loosen everything up down below there so I could move it around. It took a lot of movement. So I could pull it and drop it down through. And then I took my roll-lock disc, got my die grinder, squared the end up real good, cleaned it up real good. Another thing to note is the instructions call for you to drill a 3/16 hole for a stop screw for the column saver there. They want a 3/16 hole 1 inch from the end of the column housing. It's actually a 1/2 inch. So a 1/2 inch fits perfectly. I don't know why they put an inch, but they did. But anyway, back to our column here. How this works is this bearing here will slide onto there. We take our column housing, that slides up and under there and goes over it, I believe. Then we have 2 bearings over here, slide to there. Then this goes over that. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna put this all together, tighten down our set screw to make a mark, assemble everything, make sure everything's gonna fit. Then you have to grind flats to give the set screw more of a contact area. And then pull everything back apart once again. And the U-joint here, oops, that's the wrong one. We're gonna take our U-joint here. This is a rounded shaft, as you can see there. And this is a rounded end. It doesn't say this in the instructions, but just from what I know, little I know, and some online searching, so that's actually welded on to the shaft, which I'm not really wild about. I believe that's a 3/4 double D end that this shaft over here will stick in. and then you run the rest of the linkage or what have you to your steering gear. And just on final note, this is what I use a lot. I use that to kind of square up the tube, and it made it a lot nicer. Just a type of die grinder, air electric with a Rolock disc. Just wanted to give you a little bit more detail about how this all fits together. Here's my stop, and you can see the flat I put on there. I put one there too, put a lot of Loctite, and tightened it really well. Put some muscle into it, grease that up. Next I'm gonna slide that over that bearing stop assembly and slide that on and tighten it to that flat. I'll grease those up as well. So that's how it works. Then it'll be ready to slide up into the column. I'll probably end up welding this on while I have it out here on the bench. So the next time you see it, it should be all assembled and ready to go. The steering column is finally installed for the final time. You can see there how there's my set screw, my bearing, U-joint I welded. Don't really like that, just because it's on the steering and I'm not real confident in my ability to weld really thick stuff. But I cranked the old welder up and went to town. Seems pretty good. I can live with it. Got my steering wheel on, everything all buttoned up underneath, nice and tight. It works really good, no play. Overall, I'm pretty happy with it. It was a lot of work, but not so much a lot of work, just a real rigmarole, kind of taking stuff apart, putting it back together, checking distances, such and so on. But that part is done, and that was really a part that I was worried about, just because you only really get one shot at cutting this stuff up, and if it don't work, then you gotta go aftermarket, spend more money. But yeah, hopefully this will all work out. You'll notice I did leave that pretty long. And the reason I did that was in case if there was an issue with this joint, or if it didn't work out for me, or if it went bad down the road, what have you. My thinking is you probably just have to cut, and then you still have enough of a stub left over to put a new joint on or whatever you wanted to use. So that's why I did that way. And that was a little bit easier because I didn't have to make a second cut, so that helps. But I think next I'm going to move on. I have to remove this brake drum and remove this right here because there's a different one that comes in the kit. So I think I'm gonna do that next. And I'll do that and mount my new arm, put that back together, and then I'm gonna mount my box, and the box will mount somewhere right in here. And it does involve a little bit of welding and some trial fitting, I'm sure, so more fun, but gonna get after that and hopefully get this thing knocked out. Next step is removing the brake drum, because you have to get to these bolts that fasten your linkage. This is what the steering box will hook onto, and that's what will move your wheel and steer your vehicle. So I got that taken apart. And just a thing of note, the bolts that come in the kit are too small, far too small, too short. So I had to go get these grade 8 bolts. I had to buy them separately. The reason being is originally these are what they call a huck brake, which I really have no idea what those are. Just way before my time. And this has been converted to what they call a Bendix drum brake. So in the kit, they don't account for that. That's why the bolts are so much shorter, so you do have to get longer bolts if you're running a setup like this. Also, the old steering arm, you can either cut that or leave that. I'm not entirely sure what I'm gonna do. Right at this moment, I'll probably cut it at some point, but I might leave it just in case you wanna put everything back to stock. Be one less thing to worry about. So that looks normal, or so that is normal for these. So we'll get that on there good and tight. Probably repack my wheel bearing, I do that both sides, repack both wheel bearings, and put everything back together. So the next step that they want you to do in the instructions is to drill a hole in the frame to mount the steering gear. And the instructions, I have two sets of instructions. They're both available online. And they give like 2 or 3 different measurements. I'm gonna go with the updated one, which they want you to measure from the axle center line towards the front of the vehicle, 12.5 inches and 1 inch down from the top of the frame rail. So I already have this center punched and marked, and so I'm gonna drill a little pilot hole, and then they want you to drill 3/8 hole. Just double checking that, making sure it's correct. We're gonna start with drilling our pilot hole right now. So I have my holes drilled, my box now mounted. And how this works is, if I can get you a good shot here, you bolt this plate on, and that plate is gonna need to be welded to the frame. So that first hole we drilled, I was talking about earlier, you gotta see it right there, that bolts up, and that sits on the ledge of the frame there, like so. And then you tack it in place. Then we're gonna put our spacer and drill our other hole right there. And then it should be mounted. So some other things to note. The first time I drilled the hole, it was in the wrong spot. I had to drill it lower. Second is with this particular steering box, the threads were actually metric and they're all gummed up. So that took me a little while to figure out why my hardware wasn't fitting. Oh, and there wasn't any hardware included. So I had to supply my own. Luckily I had some stuff on hand. But it threw me for a loop because this is a metric box and it claims to have included standard hardware. So it's just another thing. Who knows? You buy this kit, it might be standard. Who knows? It's a remand box. But yeah, so that was kind of a rigmarole and took way more time than it should. But we got it in there, and next up, I'm going to tack this bracket on. Here's a quick shot of everything all welded up. It's got my bracket all welded in. Not the prettiest welds by any means, but I think they'll do. I think they'll be good enough. Hopefully they will be. That one's particularly ugly. I didn't get as good as penetration as I wanted to. But overall, I think it will work for what I'm trying to do. And now I'm gonna just put a quick coat of paint on there and get my box installed for the final time. So that'll be another small milestone. This is what I got going on while I'm waiting for that paint to dry, my power steering gear bracket. I got a new rag joint. This is the steering gear, or the steering shaft that I showed you a little bit earlier, but I ran it through the blast cabinet and gave it a fresh coat of paint. And I also tapped these holes. Now here's my steering shaft. This will have this end will be cut and then have the U-joint on the end. But what I'm doing here is this is the old shaft, and you can see here where they kind of had some plastic pieces in there. They kind of stuck up through there, and then I melted them out and I broke it apart. I separated it. But those are for if you're in an accident. it'll collapse the steering shaft. It'll just come out the bottom and try to push that way instead of coming up right into your face. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm just going to put a couple little, so I get on camera, probably not. Put a couple, I tapped them. I'm going to put a couple little grub screws in there and just kind of snug them down and put some Loctite. Just try to mimic the same thing from the factory. It's not ideal or as good as they did it at the factory, but I figure it's better than nothing. And so yeah, we'll basically have a rebuilt kind of hybrid steering shaft. Basically what I'm doing here is I'm getting everything bolted up, and I gotta check for my belt length. I got my crank pulley on, and those two bolts, that's where the power steering bracket goes. This is where the gear will go. So I'm just trying to fit everything up and get everything to play nice with each other, which has been a lot easier said than done. So what I got going on right here is this is my power steering bracket, and it was originally flat, and the pulley, the orientation with the pulley, it sat out too far. And so what I ended up doing, the belt didn't line up. I don't think it would have worked out well at all. I just took an angle grinder with a flat disc. First I did some of the heavy lifting with die grinder with a burr on it. And I just kind of machined it, so to speak, the best I could, and just use a straight edge to check to make sure it's fairly straight. It does line up well. I'm pretty pleased with it, but I am bummed out. I have to use this pulley because what I didn't realize and what I didn't really think about when I purchased the other one is that it's dished, and so the belt will actually ride on that inside pulley, and this one sticks out and just does nothing. So I'm going to paint it black. So I'm bummed about that because I just hate the look of it. The billet isn't hot rod, so I'm not digging it. This is the power steering bracket that came with the kit, and I hate it. It's just really cumbersome, and I feel kind of overdone. We'll see if this one's strong enough. I think it will be for this. It's just a cruiser type vehicle. It's not a big horsepower autocross type of vehicle. It just was cumbersome. It felt overly complicated. There was a big time interference with the water pump and alternator belt, the main belt, on these Allen heads, and so that would have to be addressed sooner or later. I'm not totally sure what I even end up doing with that. So that's where I'm at. I'm going to get these painted up, install my pump, and I need to get a belt yet. So I'll have to source a belt somewhere. Then we'll get that all installed, get my gear in, and then we'll be getting close. So you get these quick coat of paint on these, and we'll just keep on rolling. Okay, so I ran into yet another issue, and this one was totally self-inflicted. I got my pump in, got my belt on, seems to fit pretty good. The alignment hopefully is good enough. It's a tad bit off, but it really doesn't look that bad. Got all my lines hooked up. The problem I ran into was with the steering shaft and these U-joints. I showed you previously, I was going to use this rag joint into this shaft that I got at the junkyard, and then I bought a new rag joint. The problem I had with this is that the angle is just way too severe for this rag joint to work. So that sounded a lot better in my head, but it didn't work out that way. So what I ended up doing, I don't know if I'll keep it like this. I might probably end up changing it. And for anybody trying to do this at home, do this at your own peril. Anytime you're messing around with steering or brakes, you probably shouldn't do this. I wouldn't do it if I were you, but I'm gonna do it and try it just to tidy up just to finish up some other stuff. I need to center the wheel. I need to bleed it and check it for leaks and see if it's actually gonna work. So what I did was I took the old rag joint that I got at the junkyard, and I cut it apart or separated it and used just this flange part. Then I welded this U-joint that came with the kit to it because the splines were they're just different. There's no flat spot. They're way too small for that U-joint. It wasn't the right U-joint for this box. So I welded it to a flange that did have the right spline count. And I mean, it works. I think it probably would work. I don't foresee any issues with it, but I don't really like it, especially for a steering system. You should be very, very careful when working on these because it could mean your life. But here we are, and like I said, I repeatedly said I don't like it, but I'm just trying to make everything work with what I have at my disposal. You get tired of ordering stuff over and over, and it takes days, and a day-long project takes a week, and well, you know how it goes. But got everything hooked up. I'm gonna fill it with fuel, or not with fuel, with power steering fluid, and then just with the cap off, what I'll do is just turn the wheel here, lock to lock, several times, just to get all the air out of the system. Then we'll fire it up and see what happens. Okay, so we got her fired up. Doesn't appear to be any leaks anywhere. Just found some residual left in there from when I tightened it. Then I used clear power steering fluid, so I don't think that's leaking. The belt seems alright. It's not making any noise. Steering works and doesn't. No noise, nothing weird. So yeah, I'm gonna call that a victory. Seems to be doing what it should. I'm just glad that it's not leaking anywhere, because that's always a nightmare to try to fix these when they're leaking. So I did a good job getting it bled out right. I'm dealing with a little bit of a bind in the steering, and I don't think it had a pretty decent angle, but I wouldn't think it's too much, but I'm definitely not an expert. Then I gotta center up the wheel, obviously adjust my linkage there. But yeah, I'm very, very pleased. It was a hard fight, but we're getting there. Moving on to the shock mounts here, and as you can see, it's a fairly extreme angle. I don't really like it. It seems pretty extreme to me. What I'm doing is basically measuring, going off from where the old mount was to get my length, and then using an angle finder as well to mount it at the same angle these mounts were originally mounted at. It seems pretty extreme, but I did throw the angle finder on the rear shocks, and it's the exact same angle as the rears. I don't know if it's going to be an issue or not. I'm going to drill this one and bolt it in. That's what the instructions called for. That's how I removed them. They're bolted in. You can see where I ground the heads off. Over here, I already have this one installed, and I went ahead and sloppily welded that one on, but it should be strong enough. I don't think there's a ton of pressure on the shock mount. Reason being is because where the previous owner notched that frame, there's a big metal plate behind there with some space into it, and I just think it'd be really hard to drill through and just take a ton of time. Welding took hardly any time. Not the greatest welds in the world, but I think they'll work. Again, I don't like the angle, but that's really about the only option I'm left with. And as you can see there, I did on this side, I mounted up the old mount and measured. The shocks are the same length. And I'll show you that here in a second. I ended up splurging a little bit. Bought some different shocks because I'm afraid the originals will be pretty tight. They're kind of the spring assisted kind. I got these over here. This is what came off of it. I just think it will be a little softer ride with these new shocks. I bought these for another vehicle and I like them. If you're going through the parts catalog looking for shocks for one of these pickups with this type of shock mount setup, the front shocks, I believe these came off of a 65, like 73 Mustang, you can get them for. And the rears are just Tri-5 Chevy. So there's a ton of options as far as that goes. So if you're looking for shocks and you want this kind, you'll have to look up Mustang and then Tri-5 Chevy, 55 to 57 Chevy. That'd be a car, 210, Bel Air 150. So we'll get these drilled out and get these bolted on and keep moving right along. Still messing around with these shocks here. And kind of the problem I ran into was I had them at a really steep angle, as you've seen a little bit earlier. The reason I did that, I was just copying what was already there, and I found out that was wrong. It didn't look right. It looked really bad going when I switched it to this side over here from this side it was originally at, and found out you're not supposed to mount them more than 20 degrees. So this one was easy because I drilled holes and bolted it. So I just moved it. I trimmed up that bracket a little bit, but I'm really happy with how that fits. It kind of throws you for a loop because that bottom, that's the best angle you can get by switching these side to side and front to back and yada yada. So I'm pretty happy with that. It's pretty good. So I'm gonna just copy the other side here, which I welded in stupidly. So it's gonna take a little bit of time to get that out, but I will get it out. Oh, I'm not looking forward to that. I wish I hadn't done that. But we got one side in. Another reason I like these shocks is because of the color. I think they give kind of a retro look, a real vintage type of look. I think they match things real well. They look real cool on the back. I bought them for another car in the past as well. I like them. Okay, so we got our shocks on, got our wheels on, got everything tightened up, all the linkage, box, steering shaft. Got the other side done here. Rerouted my fuel line and ground. And I'm really happy with the way, I'm glad I changed that. Those shocks are in a lot better position. Apparently you want to get them as straight up and down as possible. And that was about the best I could get. So hopefully that helps with the handling because they were, you can see how they were originally, a severe angle. So hopefully that'll help the handling. I think any little thing you can do on this to help it handle better, it's going to pay huge dividends because they don't handle that great from what I've been told. So to finish up with the steering, I'm going to center the steering wheel. I'm going to show you a little bit about that. So basically what I'm going to do, let's hop in the cab here. Oops. Give you a good shot of that. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to steer the wheel. Just go all the way to one lock. Then count the number of turns it takes to get to the next lock, or to where it stops as far as it goes lock to lock. So you want to go to the other lock, stop, and then go count the turns, and then turn back and stop in the middle. And so it'd be, I think this is 3.5 turns lock to lock, so you'd want to be at like 1.75 roughly. So that's what you do to get it centered as good as you can. And then I got my puller on here, just pop the wheel off, center it up, then pop it back on. And then you'd fine tune it with your alignment, of course, which I'm gonna give this thing a full alignment. So I'm gonna do that real quick. That kind of gives you a rough rundown of how to do it. Just count the turns. Every vehicle is probably a little bit different, whether it's 2.5 or 3 or 3.5 or who knows. But the important thing is just try to get it as straight as possible, pop it off. You can get away with doing it this way on older vehicles because there's no airbag clock spring or anything like that. The column just spins freely no matter what. So it's the way I've done it in the past and it's worked, and it's the way I'm gonna do it now. So I'll get that all centered up, get my wheel pop back on, and hopefully for the final time, I've had that wheel off a few times, and that'll be that. We'll be done with the steering finally. Okay, so next up, I have all the mechanicals as far as the power steering, pretty much all the mechanicals all finished up, and I'm moving on to the front clip assembly, which I've been really wanting to get done just to make this thing look like an actual truck for once, not just some ongoing project. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to plug up all the holes in the firewall, which there's a lot of them. And I bought a generic, you can kind of see here, I bought a generic plastic plug kit off Amazon, and it didn't have really good luck. I've used a few of them, didn't have really good luck with it. It just seemed like every size was either too big or too little. So what I ended up doing is I found these on Amazon, and they're a little plastic, zoom in there, grommet. And there's several sizes. I just bought an assorted kit right up here. And I really like these. They're really pliable and really flexible. And if you ever do need to use the hole again to run a wire through or something like that, you can just cut a little hole and pinch it through. I've been having real good luck with that. Actually, I bought this plate. This is a heater blower motor delete plate. This I kind of haphazardly plugged up. Good enough for now, but I don't really like it. It's not very nice. I'll probably just make up a plate for that and redo that at some point, but it's not gonna be now. But yeah, I'm just gonna keep plugging away here, getting these plugged up, and getting ready to I got my hood seal on, and so now I'm ready for the hood hinges. I believe I'm gonna put the hood on first, and then the rest of the front clip is what I'm gonna attempt to do. So I'll kind of show you a little bit more about that in a second here, but yeah, I'm gonna get these all plugged up and keep moving. So I've got pretty much all of these holes on the firewall plugged. There's a few that I don't have small enough plugs for. I might just use some seam sealer or some RTV to just kind of get it plugged. There I made a little cover that was difficult dealing with, that big hole in the firewall for the steering column. They don't make a seal or anything like that, so it's kind of on my own. And I bought a roll of, I think it's neoprene rubber off of Amazon. I use that stuff for everything. I use it over there, which doesn't look very good, but it worked really good for that heater blower motor delete. Over here, I'm prepping my hood hinges. And what I did for these, because I didn't want to paint them because I thought it looked too nice. It wouldn't fit in with the rest of the engine compartment. I wanted to keep that natural type of look. So what I did is I just wire wheeled them real quick. I just put them in a vise and wire wheeled them with a drill. Then I sprayed them down with a mix of 50/50 ATF and acetone. I use that stuff all the time as well. It really cleans metal really well. If you let it soak and you wipe it off, I think it'll keep it a real natural type of finish. I think it'll fit really nice without having that real thick rust scale that it did have. So as you can see from the factory, I don't think they were ever painted. I think they're kind of just that natural metal finish. So I kind of want to keep in with that. So I'm going to get my fasteners rounded all up and move on to this hood, try to get this hood installed. So we'll keep on rolling. Well, I'm back at it. It's a new day, and I've started on assembling the front clip on this old pickup. I decided to go ahead and break it down instead of just trying to put the doghouse on at once for a couple of reasons. These inner fenders needed to be trimmed up extensively to fit where the shock towers go and to fit the new power steering box and gears and steering shaft and such. Also, I had all new hardware already bought for all of it and a lot of the new rubber for the anti-squeak type of stuff. And it just made it kind of, I guess, somewhat easier. Disassembling it is not all that easy. It's not hard. It doesn't take a lot of thought, but it's pretty time consuming. So been cranking away on that. And what I've got done so far is I've got my hood on, and I did that yesterday. And I had a helper help me with that because it's definitely a two-person job unless you're extremely talented and strong. They didn't want to be on camera, so I didn't film any of that. But we got it on there. It's just on there kind of loosely. It needs to be adjusted, that's for sure. And got my inner fender on, trimmed, should be good. Got my driver's side inner fender, got that one cut and ready to go on. So I'm gonna get after that, and hopefully we can get this thrown on here pretty easily. I'm getting pretty excited because it'll finally look like a truck for the first time, probably a long time. I know it's sat with the front clip off of it for a very long time, and ever since I've owned it, it's never had a front clip. I'm tired of looking at it that way, so we're going to get rolling on that and hopefully get this finished and take you along kind of step by step somewhat and show you how everything goes together. And so without further ado, we'll get busy. So still plugging away at this front clip and making some significant progress. Slow going, but we're getting there. Got my inner fenders put on. Got my anti-squeak rubber padding in. So yeah, everything's going pretty well. It's just going a little bit slow. You can see kind of how this all bolts together. It's just time consuming. Pretty much all of the threads, you have to run a tap through them because they're full of rust, paint, you name it. Had some difficulty with this apron, and that bolts in through the cross member. And there's some little bolts that run 3 along the bottom to secure it. I ended up trimming this spot in here, and I kind of regret it. I took a little too much. When I was originally installing it, the edge of it was coming right up against that petcock. It was real tight. I didn't like it, so I cut it. I cut a little too much, so a little bit disappointed in that. But same thing over here. This side's a little different. It fastens up to the floor. And you can also see here, this is all stuff I had to clearance. Normally people assemble the inner and outer, from what I've read anyway, they assemble the inner and outer fender together and then install it on the truck. I didn't do it that way. I thought about it. But yeah, like you can see in here, it's pretty significant the amount of trimming I had to do. And I made really large cuts and removed a lot just for serviceability in the future, working on stuff. I'll probably never drive this vehicle in the weather as long as I own it, so I'm not real concerned with a lot of rain or snow or grit or anything like that. So it'll be a fair weather truck, that's for sure. Okay, so I got both front fenders loosely installed, got the front apron installed, and this was actually pretty difficult. I had to have someone help me get these on here kind of the way they go. Is this edge, if I can get a good shot of that, lips over this inner fender here, and then underneath the core support right there. So it takes some doing. It's not really easy. Then bolts up here, then bolts up there, and right along the cowl right there. But yeah, it took a lot of finagling. I had to have a helper help me, like I said, and I didn't get a lot of that on film because they didn't really want to be on film. And it was pretty boring to watch. Just a lot of trial fitting, figuring out where all the bolts go, yada yada. But got it on there, and none of this stuff fits good at all. The hood gap needs to be set. It's horrid. It's really tight up front. So I'm gonna keep, it's just really tedious. I'm just gonna keep messing with it until I get it. Got everything hanging real loose. I'm gonna put it back on the ground. I got it up on jack stands right now just because I had to get up in the inner fender so much, and it's difficult to do with the tire on. And these frames flex a lot. So I'm gonna have to get it back on the ground, sitting at under its own weight on its tires to fine tune the gaps. But gonna do that and then throw on the grill real quick, which the grill is also a pain. This whole front clip is a pain. If you can put one on completely assembled, and that's what they actually call for at least the front fender to be assembled, each fender to be assembled to the inner fender and then hang them. Because if you had like nice paint, you would scratch these terribly trying to get it on there. But got them hanging, so that's half the battle. Now I'm just gonna fine tune these gaps and get the grill on and hopefully get it finished up here to an extent. As you can see here, I'm still at it trying to get these gaps adjusted to be somewhat acceptable, and they're pretty horrendous, especially on this side. This gap is horrible. Trying to do the best I can on that. This one actually isn't too bad. I can live with that one. So working on this one, and it's kind of busting out every trick I can think of to try to tighten that up a bit and not having much luck. Might have to live with that one. Like I said, these gaps are bad, and kind of throughout the whole front clip, there'll be like 2 or 3 pieces layered together. The holes, bolt holes, are not elongated much at all, and it just makes for you're trying to fumble around with 3 different body panels, trying to get them to fit, and yada yada. So I'm gonna keep chipping away at this and see if I can get a little bit better. Well, I'm here picking back up on this thing bright and early, and I've got a good start for today. As you can see, I've got the front clip on, and I've got it adjusted about as good as I'm going to get it. And it's complete. Got the hood latch, got the top bar, got the headlights all wired in. They work. Lights work. They even got the horn to work, which is something I don't usually do, but I did. So there's that. So we got it all put back together. I got most of the wires loomed up as well because I'm really pushing to get this thing on the road and take it for a drive. It's been a while for this thing. I've been working on it a while, hoping to drive it, obviously. So we're going to keep cranking away. And about the only thing I have left is I bought some new tires, and I'll show you those here in a second. Here's what I got for tires that just were delivered today. Got some nice wide whites I'm going to throw on this thing. Hopefully it'll be a nice finishing touch. Kind of feel like I'm missing something, or the truck's kind of missing something, so hopefully these will give it a nice kind of a color, a different color than just the red and the blue, and kind of break it up a little bit. So we're going to get these thrown on. That and the tires that are on it, they have a ton of tread, but I believe the date code was from like the early 90s. They're probably definitely not safe. They're probably pushing 30 years old, I'm assuming, or more. So we're gonna get these switched on and take this thing for a spin, hopefully. Just got these wide whites on and got this thing pulled out of the shop, and I gotta say, I'm impressed. I'm really happy with how this turned out. It's probably kind of hard to tell with the lighting being what it is out here. A little lower maybe, but these wide whites just really made everything pop. It looks 100 times better than it did before. I was a little bit disappointed when I first got this front clip on and set it on the ground, and the stance is pretty decent. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm just really happy with the look. These tires are not cheap, but worth every penny in my book. Definitely. Really couldn't be too much happier with how it turned out. Well, finally, the moment we've all been waiting for. I'm going to take this thing for its first real drive, and God knows how long, and I'm pretty excited. It's been a long time coming. It's been a ton of work, but we'll see how it goes. This thing typically fires up real easy. Until it gets hot, it's hard to start. Hard-ish. It's still not too bad. I'm going to have to resolve that at some point. Here we go. Brake is off. We're good. So it doesn't ride too bad. I've only gone half a block, but the steering isn't the best for being a reman box. I don't know how well they reman these, but it does have some play. It's not horrible, but it's not great either. Not too happy with that. So it's not bad till you get on like a bumpy road or hit several pumps, and it kind of goes where it wants to. You kind of steer it, and it kind of takes that as a suggestion. So probably have to do something with that. I think that's probably about as good as it gets with these. The previous owner said he replaced the kingpins, and it looks like he has. But she's still, this little boy still likes to wander a bit. So honestly, it's not bad. I mean, it's noisy and it's hot, but the cruise is actually pretty decent. Just whenever you hit a bump, it just wants to dart in kind of an unpredictable manner. That'll take some getting used to.
I might try to invest in maybe some sway bars or something like that to kind of tighten it up, just to make it a little more predictable. The brakes are, it's got really good pedal feel, but they don't, you can't rely on them. They just don't stop. Maybe they'll bed in better because they are new. So really, kind of the approach I'm taking is just leave it in gear, hit the brake, just let the engine do something, take up some of the braking. Because man, this thing is. I mean, again, they're not horrible. It's just nothing like a modern car that what you'd expect from a more modern vehicle. It takes a little bit of skill. You really got to pay attention to driving. Yeah, I'm on a bumpy, rough road. I don't know if you can tell. It just kind of darts here and there. The steering's not real tight, but yeah, I need to take a corner fast. It just wants to roll over. The engine runs good. It's got decent power. So I'm gonna take this thing around town for a while until I get up the nerve to take it up to like 60 or so on the highway. Oh,
Well, that's going to do it for this episode, and I appreciate you watching, and I thank you for following along through this kind of journey with this vehicle. It's been a long road, and I've had a lot of fun doing it. I mean, some days I've wanted to totally push this thing off a I get so frustrated, but I just hung in there and got it done, made it a running and driving vehicle, and is the paint perfect? No. Does it have rust? Absolutely. Are the gaps good on the body alignment? No, not really. But like I said, I had a lot of fun putting it together, and I've had even more fun just cruising this thing around. It runs really well. It's got decent power. It handles pretty good for a 75-year-old vehicle, I would say, or going on 75 years old. So I'm pretty happy with it. But like I said, nothing about this thing is perfect. And if anybody can do it, if I can do it, anybody can do it. Because I don't have a ton of skill, but just persistence, hanging in there and figuring stuff out, and it's paid off pretty good. I'm pretty happy with the end result. So one more vehicle that is no longer sitting in a shed and is actually usable. So I'm pretty proud of that and happy with that. So yeah, that about does it for this pickup. There's a couple odds and ends I have yet to do on it, but nothing real major. Just needed to put the carpet in it and alignment and maybe a little fine tuning here and there, but that's about it. That's pretty much going to do it for this truck. I'm just going to use it and enjoy it. So once again, I really thank you for watching. And if you liked this video and liked any videos in this series I've done on this 1950 truck, please throw me a like, subscribe, and be on the lookout for more episodes coming up in the future. I'm going to be working on a 1971 Chevy Chevelle that's kind of been an ongoing project of mine that I'm going to be doing a few upgrades to. So keep an eye out for that. Hopefully it'll be pretty entertaining. So yeah, that'll about do it here at Crown Auto.